are again. Hot. Getting hotter these days, isn't it? Seems like it. Either I talk too fast or I talk too slow. Either I'm in the wrong setting or the wrong outfit. Whichever the case. I don't know. But here I am. Here we are, right? Where to begin? Well, I'd like to give you a bunch of stuff to ponder and consider, and hopefully won't bounce around. I've given you a lot over these past few videos. Again, I've left a lot out. Just trying to give some of the people something to fill in. Study for yourself and to look it up. I appreciate the comments of the ones that I am getting that are intelligent and kind. I appreciate that. I would ask, limit your comment to one or two, because when you start writing books on the comment section, you sort of distract from everyone being able to read those comments and things. But I do appreciate your input and your output and those things. Okay. Let's look at things from where we're at. Excuse me. And y'all bear with me because I'm really tired. Want to give you a few things to consider. And I've already done that in the past videos. If you didn't go back and pick that up, I would suggest you do. A lot of hidden information there. Hopefully you have eyes to see and ears to hear to pick that up. Again, we're told that we have no need of a teacher at all. That the Spirit of God will lead us into that understanding if you will allow and seek and knock. And all of these things you can have if you really want to know. In the society we're living in right now, there is it's crazy. Everything from your scientists to your theologians to, just politicians, everybody can sense that there is something terribly wrong that hasn't been previous to this time. Oh yeah, we've had earthquakes and calamities all over forever. Since the beginning, we know there have been these kinds of phenomena. But there are things now that are taking place that haven't been so much before. And I would like to look at a few of those things, perhaps, so that we can, again, stay on that same page. Time is of the essence, but I can't just continue to rush, and I know I'm not pleasing to everyone the way I speak or the words I choose or whatever. And what can I say about that, right? Anyway, more things, if you haven't already been studying, some more things you need to look into and consider. I had said previously that just about every religion can be traced back somewhat to Babylon. That if you go at least that far back, and Babylon was a pretty big empire. You're looking around, again, don't quote me on my numbers and figures. I'm giving you tidbits and hints so you can go in there and look it up and check it for yourself. But I want to say the historians say around 600 BC. I believe that's correct, 601, 600 BC, that we have Babylon. There are Babylonian tablets even today that speak of that empire. It was considered, I guess still is, considered one of the 7 wonders of the world was located there, which was the Hanging Gardens. Interesting stuff to look into. Okay, now, considering Babylon, and since we know we have archaeological facts and proof, there was a king in Babylon, and one of those Babylonian tablets, I forget which museum it's in, but it is basically put in there from a king of Babylon at that time, was called Nebuchadnezzar. Again, this is in your archaeological finds. So this, I mean, these are historical fact stuff. Anyway, this Nebuchadnezzar guy, he's also wrote about in the Torah, or the Old Testament, which is in the book of Daniel, that it speaks of Nebuchadnezzar. And he had a dream. So I'm referring you to go to Daniel chapter 2. It's important you look there. Again, as I've said before, look at every angle, every aspect. Anyone that wants to know the reality and truth should be looking into everything. And you know, I've mentioned the Quran. We've referenced the Quran in some of this study. We've referenced some of the Native Americans and some of their prophecies. And wow, we've been looking from Egypt and all of that. But I want you to go in there and check out some of the stuff concerning Babylon. We've also been talking about this Luciferian sect, which is the main objective or agenda, the main driving force, if you will, that seems to rule the world with the concept of the New World Order and those things. Again, it's just so much information, y'all, so you have to bear with me. I'm trying to get this to you to the best of my ability. I still have a life and a family life, so I'm trying to do this and take this time to share with you to the best of my ability. I do have somewhat of a testimony. I do have some things I want to share with you that well, we'll see if we get there. Anyway, this Babylonian guy, Nebuchadnezzar, it's written about in Daniel, and in chapter 2 of Daniel, this Nebuchadnezzar guy has a dream, and the dream he has is pretty astounding. It becomes prophecy, if you will. And all of his magicians at the time, and the Chaldeans, these wise men and stuff like that, couldn't really give him the decipherment of that dream. They didn't know the interpretation. And there was a certain individual there who had been captured from Jerusalem. And again, you can go back, this is like 600 BC. And you go in there, and this guy's name was Daniel. And he was captured and was basically a Hebrew slave in Babylon. And during his time there, they were training, because you got to understand the Babylonian Empire. Again, go in there and look all this stuff up, y'all. You don't need me to tell you the history, okay? Anyway, so Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, and it's very disturbing. The only one that can give it to him and give him the decipherment or interpretation thereof is Daniel. Daniel comes to him and tells him about this dream. Well, the dream this king has is about a statue. He sees a statue come up, and it has a head of gold, and the arms and chest area of silver. And then it goes on, and it has a brass or a bronze belly or girdle, if you will. And then it has legs of iron, and the two legs of iron go into the feet that has clay and iron mixed together. And these are things I want you to go in there and look at and see about this. It's in chapter 2 of Daniel in your Old Testament. Important stuff. Anyway, Daniel gives the meaning and definition. Again, prophecy for the most part will interpret itself. He talks about, in this statue, it becomes more of a timeline, and tells about the empires that will rule the world. Our history, regular history now from where we're at, looking back, this prophecy was dead accurate, okay? And the reason this is important is because Daniel is the one that gives the prophecy. He's the one that gives the interpretation, and he was right on. The gold head represented the Babylonian Empire. From there it went on. The next empire that came up was the Medes and the Persians, and they came together. It was the Medo-Persian Empire. And then, of course, coming out of that was the Grecian Empire, and coming out of the Greece with the legs we had Rome. And Rome has been trying to unite all of those what we call countries now, if you will, or nation states, however you want to refer to it. And it talks about this final empire that would never quite get it together. They would not mix, much like the miry clay and iron doesn't mix. Again, I'm telling you things that you should already know. Okay, so the reason I'm telling you this is because we have history that shows this did occur, okay? The only thing that hasn't occurred is in that final empire there was a rock, not hewn out of, or not hewn by hand, but it comes forth and comes down, becomes a whole mountain and stuff, and you go in there and look at that, okay, and it's talking about the end, the final climax. Now the reason I'm bringing that up in this series is because if Daniel was right 100%, 2,500 years previous to these things happening, again, you go back to Babylon 600 BC, and he's been correct all the way down through. Just some little Hebrew kid, right? As a captive in Babylon. And we have archaeological as well as historical, the historians, all of them pretty much know this now. So this has become a very interesting key to understanding prophecy, and the reason, again, that I'm bringing this up is so that you understand Daniel has other prophecies that he gives. Excuse me. Concerning this final empire, concerning the rise of what is called the Antichrist, for the most part. And if you go in and study the word anti, everybody has the concept that anything that is against something else is anti. And the idea, if you really go in there and look at where the word anti, that prefix, comes from, it is basically to substitute, to remove and replace. So it is not necessarily to come in war, but to basically give you something that replaces the true Christ, so to speak, in that concept, or in this case, the Messiah. Alright, a few things other that you need to look at. And again, I'm just giving you stuff to go check out, alright? Probably not telling you a whole lot at this moment. There's a few things concerning these days that we live in. And the things that we're seeing happen and take place right now are phenomenal. And I'm talking about everything from the concept of the belief in UFOs. Back in the 50s, if you were said to believe in a UFO, you were a nut. And now the majority of the world has a concept or a belief system that believes in UFOs and unidentified flying objects. But people automatically assume that when they see a UFO, which stands for unidentified, they automatically, in their mind, identify it as something from outer space or something that is alien in its origin. And in reality, there is more to do with perhaps some interdimensional concepts rather than interplanetary, but a lot of it is our own governments working with technologies that they have that would boggle your mind. Okay, now, it's not to say that we're not going to have that visitation of the fallen again. Just have to bear with me on this to get there, right? Because we do know, if we look into the agenda, and some of y'all are familiar with what's called the Illuminati card game, that's interesting to look into. And one of the final cards is the whole concept of an alien invasion. And I've considered, when I was a kid, I wondered about the concept, people talk about how the Messiah was going to come, and when he came, that for this battle of Armageddon, where the world would come together to battle. And I'm thinking, why would they battle the coming of the Son of God? How could you get people to do that? If you knew that there is this being, the creator, if you will, coming in the cloud, how would you get people together to battle against that? Well, Reagan said it best when he said, if we could get the whole world to understand that we were being invaded, then the whole world would come together under one umbrella. And so with the programming that we go through about aliens, everybody's ready for that concept, for the alien agenda, that we can all come together under that one world umbrella because we're being invaded. Now, of course, that's down the ways a little bit, but we're being programmed to accept such a concept as that. Excuse me. Now, looking at a few other things too. There is the principle or the point in prophecy in the biblical aspects. We'll go back over to the New Testament in Matthew 24. I mentioned something about maybe we would touch on that because we're looking, I think, at the Gog-Magog principles previous. In Matthew 24, there are keynotes here that we really have to pay attention to. Now, one of those is obviously see that you're not deceived is one of the first key things. And I guess I could give you the whole lowdown on that, but surely you already know this, and I hope to, maybe we can touch on it. I just want to give you some highlights to be looking into. But there's one part in there that is called the fig tree parable. And to learn the olive or the fig in Matthew 24. And maybe we should go over that verse by verse, but let me at least give you this so that you can run with it and study for yourself, get a head start, right? In that parable, we understand that if we look to Ecclesiastes, and we understand the concept of how the fig and the olive are a representation of Israel. Or again, I don't want to get into all this debate over the Zionists and stuff like that. I can show you some scripture that even talks about where the Israel we have today is the one that we're discussing. That's in your prophecy, even though it mentions that it has been infiltrated by basically Satan and his minions. Read Revelation. I mean, it's pretty plain. Maybe we'll touch on that too so that everybody's on the same page there. Okay, so in this point down here, it says all of these things previous, and it talks about the earthquakes and how the frequency would pick up and how things are going to get tough. It talks about pestilence, which is disease without cure, and we could be looking at chemical, biological, who knows. And it talks about the wars, the rumors of wars, and all of these things, and the frequency, again, picking up. And it really does. It just gives you a play-by-play of the things that you're seeing happening. Now, it says all of these things are going to occur. And in this one particular part, where it's talking about that parable, it says, learn that parable. It says, when you see it tender, the branch shooting forth tender in the leaves, you'll know that it's nigh and close, that we're living in those days, the final shebang. And he says, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Now, there's different speculation as to the translations here and to the way people see that. Was Yeshua speaking about that generation? And if not, which generation was he talking about? Well, interestingly enough, depending on if you want to break down the Greek really sharp in here, he was perhaps speaking to them about their generation, where they're at, that all these things would begin to take place, as in what Paul had said at a later time, that the mystery of iniquity doth already work. But we also know that there is a dual meaning sometimes in Scripture, and quite often. Was he talking about the generation, the fig tree generation, the generation that became this new Israel? Okay? If that's the generation that he's speaking of, then Israel became a nation, okay, in 1948. Now, we know from history, we can go back and see how all of this came to be. And, you know, again, I favorited some different videos that will give you an explanation and understanding how all of that happened. But ultimately, if what some people are teaching is correct concerning that generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled, and all of these things is speaking of basically the 7-year tribulation and the return of the Lord and all of those, if that's the case, that this generation would happen to be the one of 1948, a generation, according to Scripture and to most scholars, will say it's a 70-year period. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu which is the Prime Minister of Israel currently, stated that I guess this year they're having an anniversary, 63 years of them being a nation. Interesting. Now, we also know that the United Nations is pushing for Israel to give up land so that we can now have a Palestinian state as well. Okay, and there's a lot of conflict over that concept. But if that generation is a 70-year period, and this is 63, and we're pushing towards September for this to go down, and we're already having problems around the borders all the way, it is very feasible to consider, if it's a 70-year period, that this could be the year that would start that big 7-year point going. It makes sense. 63 plus 7 is 70. It also fits with what people were showing out there as the Daniel timeline. It would also fit with the Genesis concept, where we find that God said his spirit would not always dwell with man, but give 120 years, and you go in and you find out that perhaps that is the Jubilee years, and every 50 is one, and we have ones who have kept up with that down through time, and so therefore we are actually coming up, and if you add up 120 times the 50, it comes out to 6,000, which would bring it up to the point of the final end of this. What's 2018, 17, something like that would be the final climactic aspect. A few other things in September. The stars are doing some interesting things. John had a vision over in the book of Revelation, and where I've decided to set up, it seems there's mosquitoes, and it's hot right here, and I'm in the shade. It says the sun's going to get so hot that it would scorch me, and did it not somewhere in there? Okay. So, let's see. Let me play this back. I'm hoping I'm giving you stuff. Let me see how much time I've already used up, because I don't want to just keep going and rambling. And I may move and change it over, so bear with me.